So if you follow my channel, I thank you for that. You know that normally I turn bowls. That's my jam. But this week, again, I'm doing a cutting board. Wedding season is coming up, and that seems to be a popular gift. Because I have a laser engraver, I can also personalize them, so that makes it extra special for a wedding gift. So this week I'm doing a Chevron board in grain. And I've watched a lot of YouTube videos on in grain Chevron patterns. And one thing that I've noticed, two things I've noticed. One is a lot of times the title will say it's in grain, and yet it's not. It's normal side grain. Secondly, when you do a side grain Chevron pattern, there's a lot of wood wastage. I'm going to do end grain, and you will see that there's very little wastage. It is a little more complicated glue up, perhaps, than doing a side grain, but I think you'll agree when you see the pattern, it's much prettier to do it as end grain, and it has its other benefits as well. I'm just using up some scrap wood that I have. I have a piece of cherry back here. I have a piece of maple, birch, and purple heart. I'm going to make an in-grain Chevron cutting board. I've set my saw blade at 60 degrees. I use my inclinometer. It's an app on my phone. I'll be honest with you, it's not critical the angle that you set. I set it at 60 degrees or 30 degrees, depending on what you measure. 30 from here, 60 from here. Yeah, it's going to be 60 degrees. Traditionally, a Chevron is either 60 or 45. But again, that's just for appearance sake. It really doesn't matter. So here you can get an idea of how the boards are cut. It ends up being a parallelogram. These two sides here are parallel to each other, cut at that 60-degree angle. And then, of course, the original edges of the board are parallel as well. So no longer a square, but a parallelogram. But the two boards and subsequent boards go together just like this. But that gives you your angle in between, and you'll see why that's important in a minute. So I have the board glued up. This is the first glue up. You can see the pattern. I've got the two cherry with a maple in the middle, two birch, I believe, and then two cherry again. They may be maple. Maple, sorry, the two outside ones are maple. And the purple heart, the thin ones are the purple heart. They're glued up on a bevel, so I can't just clamp them together this way. Reminiscent of Boys in the Hall, squeeze your head. I can't clamp them up that way because they're cut at a bevel, they'll just pop out. So I've got to put some cowls across here and clamp those down first and then bring these ones up. You'll see what I mean here in a second. So it was very difficult to try and film while I was clamping. So here's a finished product. I have a cowl across here and here, and that's just two boards on their edge that are hardwood that I can clamp down on to keep it flat. Because everything's at a 45, as I tighten up, they'll want to slide up on each other. So those hold it down. So I tighten those up fairly tight first before tightening any of these clamps up. So now that I'm holding it relatively flat, I then tighten these ones up, and then that'll sit for 24 hours. I'm going to have to put the whole thing through the thickness planer, but I'm not in grain. This is normal grain, so that can go through the thickness planer quite easily, and I'll be able to flatten it out perfectly. Right now it's not bad, but it will need to go through the thickness planer. So I haven't showed everything, but after I took the board out of the clamps and passed it through the thickness planer to smooth it up, the next thing I did was cut the strips, and you can see those strips here. And those strips, because I'm turning at 90 degrees, end up being the thickness of the board. So the width of the strips becomes the thickness of the board. Then the next thing I do is I alternate them, rotating one clockwise, the next one counterclockwise. And because I've cut the boards at a 60-degree angle and then glued them together, that's how I get the chevron pattern. I love end grain pattern cutting boards. You can do a lot with them, as you can see here. The other thing is, it is good for your knives. Just being the end grain, it's a lot tougher, but it doesn't dull your knives as easily. It also doesn't show the cuts on the board. The end grain is a little more self-healing. The other reason that I like end grain is just the pattern. If you look here, you don't get this pattern from anything else other than end grain. I originally thought I had lots of length in this board. Before I turned them, I had almost 2 feet, 24 inches, but that's on board that's an inch wide. When I cut the strips, I cut them 1.5 inches. So when I cut them 1.5 inches, I ended up with a board that finished out at about 13 inches. That's a little short for me. It ended up being fairly square at about 12 by 13. So what I decided to do, because that's all the board I had, I was using up all the scraps that I had. So what I decided to do was add the 2 boards on the end, which are known as breadboards. That's just a plain board on the end that provides a little bit of contrast. I think it looks nice and complements this board. It's also a wedding gift, so it's going to give me an area in which I can engrave the people's name and the date of their wedding, because otherwise that would have been busy to do it within the cutting board itself. So here's the money shot. The reason that people watch cutting board videos is the oiling of the board. I put the board in a mineral oil bath, and you can see here as the oil runs over how much darker the end grain gets. It really absorbs a lot of oil. The breadboards on the side are side grain, so they don't react quite the same way. They didn't darken up nearly as much as the end grain did. Here's a before picture of the board, and here it is after. You can see a little bit of a dry spot here. I will fix that up. Once it dries up, I'll add a little bit more, and then I'll buff it out with a wax. Here's a bonus board that I ended up doing at the same time. Different pattern, not chevron, but again, a very nice board, and this one will be oiled up as well. So here's the finished product. I think it turned out very well. Off camera, I did drill and install some plugs, which you can see here on the breadboards. They look like dowels, but they're not. They're just decorative. They are plugs. They don't go all the way through. Don't tell anyone. And that dry spot you saw earlier on the board, I did fix. I added some more oil to it, and it looks good now. The only thing that's left is to wax the boards, which I'll do here momentarily, and also to laser engrave them. Here's the second end grain board. Although it's not a chevron, it is a unique pattern, and I think it turned out very well also. Let me know in a comment what you think and whether or not you think doing the end grain is worthwhile. Thank you for watching.